Hey, good morning, y'all. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Friday to you. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's get right to it. If you could, invite your friends to view this video as well. Yours truly would appreciate you. Meteorologist here to share the upcoming weather for the weekend and next week, and even into the month of February. I'm at least going to give you a bit of a preview of what we expect here. So let me share my screen with you so we can take a look at the first issue at hand, and that is going to be two major storms impacting the United States, and in particular the central and eastern United States. Winter, we are kind of right in the middle of it here. It has not felt like it in the month of January for many of you in the Mid-Atlantic and in the South, and even in the Great Lakes for that matter. However, we've got two big storms to talk about next week and some shifting in the models and where exactly the storms will track. That is going to play into the weather here in the Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, even in the Ohio Valley. But nonetheless, we're going to have a lot of players on the map. Down south, a lot of rain and a lot of storms to talk about. I think we're going to have severe weather. I do even think there's a chance for some more tornadoes in areas that have already gotten a fair amount of them here so far this winter. We also see not one, but two threats for snow cutting across the southern and central plains and into the Great Lakes region and into the interior of the Northeast. Now, the I-95 corridor, I realize, is in a massive snow drought. This upcoming week, I don't think that drought comes to an end, and I'm going to tell you guys why. However, I am not throwing in the towel yet on winter. In fact, I took a look at a graphic the other day that shows that the average, the midpoint in the season for snow in the big cities of the Northeast is actually the very end of January. So next week we are at the midpoint. So if you take the first half of that right before about January 30th, you would normally double that for the second half to get your seasonal total. Now, this year I realize if you double nothing, you still get nothing. However, hope is not all lost on us here in the Northeast, and I'm going to talk about why. We are going to have colder air blasting into the northern Rockies, and that is going to spread eastward in Canada into New England and also southward right on down into Texas here next week. We were in the 80s in Dallas last week at the early part of the week. We will be in the 30s and 40s at the beginning of this week coming up for at least a day before it starts warming back up. So definitely changes in the pattern here across the country. Here's a look at our watch and warning display from the National Weather Service. Storm 1 yesterday that I referred to has winter storm warnings out for parts of central Maine and New Hampshire and advisories surrounding that. We do have a bit as well across the snow belt region of New York and in West Virginia and Western Maryland. Storm number 2 that I talked about yesterday, that is the one that'll be moving eastward towards the end of the weekend and early next week. Winter storm warnings for the central high plains, advisories around it across the southern Rockies, and also we have some advisories up for Montana. The next storm behind it will be in the same region here for Monday and Tuesday of next week, and then expanding eastward Tuesday into Wednesday. And then the fourth storm that I'm watching is still not yet in the picture, but something we'll keep an eye on for the end of the month of January. The temperature forecast from NOAA, you can see that Florida is not participating in winter this year. Well, it did briefly, but no cold air anywhere in sight in Florida. It is cooler here in the eastern United States over this upcoming weekend. This is Saturday's map, here's Sunday's map, but already warming back up in South Texas on Sunday. As we head into next week, we do see temperatures beginning to moderate here across the deep south, and still on the cool side here in the east, but still above the average. As we head into the middle of next week, we see warmth surging up the East Coast and maybe some record warmth across South Florida. 84, the record high in Miami, could be reached, but it does turn colder here. We've got some colder weather coming down across the northern plains Wednesday, and you'll see Thursday's highs drop down into the single digits and teens across the Dakotas. While temperatures start to warm back up here in Texas after a chilly start. So some back and forth going on, but no true cold air yet for the southeastern United States. Trust me, I see the comments on your videos. I know you want to see it, but I think there is a light at the end of this tunnel, and that's that we're saving on our energy bills, and they've gotten so much higher that that's kind of a blessing if you think about it. So anyway, I'm going to show you guys from weatherbell.com the European storm number 1 right here across the Great Lakes moving east into New England today. Storm 2 dropping down into the Four Corners tonight. And as we go to the day tomorrow, we can see definitely a strong trough digging down from the Great Lakes back into Texas. And this is going to be bringing a big storm out of the Western Gulf on Sunday and up the East Coast on Monday before it gets pushed away into Atlantic Canada by Monday night and Tuesday. Excuse me. There's another storm right on its heels Monday to Tuesday, dropping all the way down into West Texas on Tuesday. And that one is going to tap into some locally cold air. It could produce some winter weather here across Northwest Texas and Oklahoma during the day on Tuesday. Notice out ahead of it, though, rather than having a big supply of cold air, we actually have this high pressure region over the southwestern Atlantic flexing its muscles again into the Great Lakes. And this is something that we've seen again and again this winter. And every time the models have predicted that the ridge breaks down, they've ended up adjusting warmer, which to me as a meteorologist is super frustrating to see. But looking at the overall picture, I am not completely shocked at this. We are still in a La Nina, and we have yet to get into the cold phases of the Madden-Julian oscillation in the Western Pacific, which would drive winter storms farther east. So this is not the pattern you want to see if you're looking for a big snowstorm across the Carolinas or the Mid-Atlantic region. In fact, this storm is going to get deflected farther west. The models a few days ago tried to bring it up this direction in Ohio and Pennsylvania. Now notice they are farther west. And that is, of course, frustrating to me as somebody who's been kind of rooting on some winter here in the Mid-Atlantic states. But there is not necessarily a bad ending to this story. You guys can see strong ridging over the West Coast. Boy, do they need that right now after what was a relentless start to January. The more this pushes east, the more we get to see a trough carving out into the eastern United States. And while I don't think this storm does it, as we get to next weekend, we see kind of a back and forth here. And we'll have to see if this ridge takes over or if this trough gets deflected eastward. Either way, we are still looking at a classic tug of war between mild air in the southeast and colder air in the Rockies. And what we want to see is this ridge here pushing eastward and allowing low pressure to come up across the east, from the Gulf of Mexico up the East Coast. And the European says that doesn't happen, but other models say that it's certainly possible. So a little too soon to make any kind of call on it, but there will definitely be a potential for a fourth storm. And with this trough where it is here, we could see enough cold air cutting across the eastern U.S. for a brief winter storm. That's something I'll be keeping an eye on for you guys. But again, a little bit too soon to make that call. Now, as we look at the temperatures over the next few days, we see obviously it is cooling down here across the eastern United States. It's chilly in the southwest, but there's a lot of warm air across northern Canada. Not a great pattern for wintry weather in the northeast and mid-Atlantic states. Next week, though, it still remains a little bit on the cool side in the east, but the bigger shot of cold is coming down into Texas. And we see definitely a flip in the weather pattern here the first half of next week over parts of the south central United States. That does expand eastward into the East Coast region. So with this cold air in place, enough of it could hang on for maybe something next weekend or briefly the following week before it does warm back up. So this cold is fleeting, but it will be here for a couple of days, and that could certainly give us at least some, I don't want to say false hope, but some hope for maybe some wintry weather in the Northeast before it warms back up at the end of the month. Another shot of cold coming down. This is a very cold look for the very beginning of February. And notice how Canada flips here from extremely warm here this weekend to quite a bit colder here, not quite next weekend, but right after it. And with this cold air lurking, even though it is warm in the southeast, all it takes is one air mass to spill down east of the Appalachians into the Carolinas to produce a winter storm. Maybe it's more ice than snow, but definitely something that I am going to be watching for you guys here if the European is right. We will head back into a milder pattern. I just don't know when exactly that is. The European says it's by the 3rd and 4th of February. So we get a window at the very beginning of February for some cold to slip down before it does moderate again. So I wanted to show you all the GFS on Weather Bell and Tropical Tidbits. It didn't load, so I'm resorting here to Pivotal Weather, which is a good site, by the way, but it's got ads all over it, and I'm not a member of that. So I will show it to you anyway. This is the GFS model, and you guys can see we've got our storm kind of leaving the northeast here. And next storm here over the weekend, this is Saturday, we start to see some thunderstorms over the central Gulf states and spreading northeastward, and some light amounts of snow moving across Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio in places that haven't seen a lot. So we could see a little bit of snow here on Sunday before this moves up the East Coast and is primarily rain for the big cities and maybe thunderstorms again in New Jersey and New York, just like we saw yesterday. That moves out, that trough lifts out here. The next storm drops into Colorado and southwest Kansas as we get into Monday night into Tuesday, and maybe some heavy rain and thunderstorms in the Dallas-Fort Worth region, followed by sharply colder weather. Some models show that the snow could drop farther south into North Texas, but the majority of them say Oklahoma and Kansas. And then we see this low pressure track is actually cutting up all the way into Illinois. There's cold air in place over the Great Lakes. You see this large high pressure region setting the stage for what could be a major snowfall in parts of central and northern Illinois, as well as northwest Indiana and Michigan. So Chicagoland, this one could be a big one for you guys here on Tuesday night and Wednesday before it lifts out of the region. In the Northeast, though, a few days ago, this model showed at least some better opportunity for snow at the start, very close to I-95. Now it is showing rain, and that is not a surprise to anybody, I'm sure. But it does follow with a shot of colder air in time for next weekend. And we'll see if something tries to sneak up the East Coast. This run of the GFS shows something in the Carolinas. And coming up the East Coast, if it goes out to sea, we miss out on winter weather. If it comes up the East Coast, we see the potential for maybe some snow again in the Northeast in places that haven't seen hardly anything. And that includes, when I say the Northeast, that includes Virginia and Maryland and Delaware. But again, we are now on day 11, day 12 of this forecast run, and it's certainly too far out to make any kind of hero calls at this point. Just something I'm watching for you guys here. The European model, I will say, has done the most shifting, almost in the direction of the GFS. Shows a big storm here Sunday and Sunday night in the southeast. We'll probably have some severe weather in here across Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and the central Gulf states, maybe even the eastern Carolinas on Sunday afternoon and Sunday night. That lifts up, and it's a big rainmaker for New England near the coast, but big snow for central and northern New England, and then that kicks out to sea. The next storm, according to GFS, is farther south and produces quite a bit of extreme weather across Texas, from heavy rain and thunderstorms in San Antonio and Dallas, switching over to maybe some mixed precipitation and wet snow. But it is certainly not showing as much snow as a couple of days ago, but showing a big amount of thunderstorms in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. And this actually has a track that looks like it could produce tornadoes on the central and eastern Gulf Coast, and maybe up into central Alabama, Georgia, and possibly even middle Tennessee, depending on where that low pressure track goes. And we'll keep an eye on the Carolinas for Wednesday as well for some heavy rain and locally strong storms. This one could bring some snow briefly at the onset into eastern Pennsylvania, northern New Jersey, even the New York City metro area, but it looks like rain will be the predominant precipitation type with this storm track, and it is cutting up west of the Appalachians and has the potential to produce heavy snow. The European, though, is farther south with the snow than the GFS. The Canadian's in between the two, and so the model ranges show either heavy snow for southern Illinois and Indiana and central Ohio, if the Euro's right, or for northern Illinois, Indiana, southern Michigan, and northern Ohio, if the GFS is right. If I were going to make a forecast, I would lean more into the GFS at this point, but that does not mean that we could not see any changes. I haven't talked a lot about the West because you guys are finally drying out here, and that is good news. It is certainly going to be snowy again in the Rockies, but the coastal ranges are finally drying out here in California. We do need more rain longer term, but right now we could use the dryness before the next potential onslaught of rain, which doesn't look like it'll be any time in the near future. With the European here, we don't have any signals for any significant storms in the Gulf and tracking through the eastern U.S. However, the cold air is still here at the end of next week and into the next weekend, so we may have something sneak across the country and produce, I don't want to call it a surprise snow, but something we haven't seen yet. But what I will say, if you go back on the European just a day, and I'm sorry, I got to advance this here, you will see that the European model has shifted in where it shows the heavy snow. It was showing it across Tennessee yesterday at this time. Now it's showing it farther west across Arkansas and Illinois. So a difference of 50 to 100 miles could be pretty significant with our forecast here. So the forecast from yesterday, we had a strong guy take the low pressure and shoot it back to the west of the Appalachians. Boy, is that frustrating if you want snow. Severe weather, I have mentioned that to you guys. I think it's something we're going to be watching here. This is today. We see a threat for storms in the western Gulf states. Tomorrow, that threat for thunderstorms extends in the central and eastern parts of Georgia and Alabama. Nothing severe expected, but as we get into Sunday, for the time being, there's a marginal risk, excuse me, for some severe weather across northern Florida, southern Georgia, and South Carolina. This could expand, excuse me, this could expand a little farther north and west, but right now there's some disagreement on the exact storm track. But do not be surprised if Sunday and Sunday evening we see this upgraded to a severe weather, a slight risk for severe weather, and maybe that includes a few tornadoes as well. In the longer term, the next storm has kind of a more classic look to a severe weather outbreak to it here in the south central parts of the U.S., and that would be on Tuesday into Wednesday. The Storm Prediction Center has what we would call a slight risk, a 15% chance for severe weather across southern Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and sneaking into Georgia late Tuesday evening. And in my opinion, I think this area could grow with time if the model trend continues, and it may even sneak up into northern Mississippi, middle Tennessee, and into western Georgia. And possibly heading into Wednesday, we could see at some point some severe weather across this region, the southeastern coast. I don't think it gets down to the peninsula of Florida, but maybe northwest of Jacksonville, South Georgia, the low country of South Carolina and North Carolina, and maybe even southeastern Virginia here on Wednesday. But the Storm Prediction Center does not have a high risk of that happening yet. But I actually read that their text discussion said that there is some chance that we could have some severe weather on Wednesday. It just has not shown up yet in the forecast yet. That'll be the end of it, though. As we get into Thursday, that system moves out, and we will have a cooler weather pattern and no severe weather expected for the rest of next week. Let's talk snow, folks. Here we go. The GFS model right on through the next several days and into next weekend shows the potential for the heaviest snow falling across New England, across the snow belts, and across parts of Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri. This is the farthest north with our snow track. The European is farther south and crushes parts of southern and central Indiana, Ohio, and farther south and east, getting tantalizingly close to Baltimore, D.C., Philly, New York, and Cape Cod. It has some very heavy snow showing up over central parts of New England with the potential for 2 to 3 feet falling. The Canadians in between the two, it shows New England getting crushed, but does not show that threat as high for New York City and certainly not for DC. And it shows a farther west track with heavy snow potential back across Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. So these are 10-day forecasts, and we're talking 3 storms. The one leaving New England today, the one coming up into the Northeast and Great Lakes Sunday night into Monday, and then the one coming up Tuesday night into Wednesday. I do want to show you the central U.S. as well, because I mentioned the south central United States. Let me start with the GFS here. This is last night's run. We have had some issues getting in this morning's run, unfortunately, but the GFS does not show much of anything across Oklahoma and Texas. It's kind of an outlier. The European model, on the other hand, shows, I'm sorry, this is not the right run. Let me go back here. Shows definitely a better chance for snow across northern and northwest Texas, Oklahoma, and northwest Arkansas. And the Canadian model is kind of in between the two. It says, I'm not going to pick one side or the other, but does show significant snow across Oklahoma, the Texas Panhandle, and far northwest Arkansas, as well as Missouri. If I were going to make a forecast, I'm kind of leaning more in this direction right now, but looking at a 10-day forecast and making that call right now would be way too soon. So in the Northeast, if you go off the middle here, and you're in DC, Philly, New York, and just south and east of Boston, and really Raleigh and the Southeast, then this is, in my opinion, what I think your forecast is going to still look like. And any Seinfeld fans out there? No snow for you. No snow for you. Next. So anyway, crazy stuff. The one thing I'm going to guarantee for you all, though, is going to be heavy precipitation, starting out in Louisiana and southeast Texas, going across the entire South and then up the East Coast. This is the Canadian model, but it's, again, kind of the compromise between the GFS and Euro. And boy, does it show quite a bit of rain here. Some of these areas definitely could use some, the coastal Carolinas and southeast Georgia, but the areas that really don't need to use some would be getting the heaviest of rain. That would be Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. And I'm mindful of you folks in Alabama that are cleaning up from the storms last week. I know you don't want to see 5 inches of rainfall next week. Unfortunately, I don't have better news for you at this point. Same for the Northeast. We don't really need any more rain at this point, but unfortunately, it looks like quite a bit's going to fall. 2 or 3 inches around Philly, New York, 1 to 2 inches around DC and Northern Virginia. Amounts will be less as we get back into the West, with most of this, or western parts of the Midwest, with most of this falling as snow. And I do want to show you guys here the official monthly forecast for February does not look cold enough for enjoyment here in the eastern United States. Florida remains above average, equal chances, meaning we'll be back and forth across the midsection of the country. It's not going to be as warm a month in Texas, though. And then the chilly weather will be persisting across the northern plains, northern Rockies. That's the monthly temperature outlook. The precipitation outlook says also above, so likely we're going to see heavy snow amounts here in the Northwest. Also above in the Great Lakes, with the back and forth between the warm and cold. This could be a big snow month for some of you in the Great Lakes region and the lower Midwest. It eventually turns to below average here across Florida and the Gulf Coast. Boy, do we need that. And kind of equal chances in the Northeast. I would lean towards wetter than average, but because the Atlantic is still warmer than average. But again, this is a monthly forecast. Does not mean the entire month of February is going to be warm, though. I think it averages warm, but I think we see some flux. The European weeklies show us this is the next week coming up. Obviously still warm in the east, but cooling off here at the very end of the month. We've talked about this pattern flip, where as we get to the very end of January, beginning of February, it is on the chilly side across the Northeast, and then warmth returns and takes over much of the South and the Eastern United States for the first to second weeks of February. However, at the very end of February, after Valentine's Day and President's Day, we do see a change back to maybe some chillier weather. So the entire month of February does look mild for the Northeast and certainly warm for the South, but there is a supply of cold air that could get in here at the end of the month of February and could flip the pattern here for March. We could see a cold start to March. And if you're in the Northeast, this could be more promising for you to see snow. If you're in the Carolinas, this could mean a late season surprise, but no guarantees at this point. I don't want to guarantee that. I'm not trying to hype it up. I'm just trying to discuss with you guys kind of the undulations in the weather patterns we're looking at, kind of the flipping and the flopping, and which weeks have the tendency to be warmer than others. And this is projected to change again, but it is something that we've talked about here as the cycle persists, where we get to some chilly weather to end the month, then warming back up the first half of February, and then cooling off for the end of February and beginning of March. So thank you all for your time. Feel free to leave me any comments or questions. I'll try to answer them. As my channel grows, I think we're going to end up moving into a subscription where those of you that want to become monthly subscribers and super fans will get priority to those because I think it's valuable. I know you have a lot of questions and I want to help you guys out with everything. But I appreciate your time. I am actually doing a fundraiser with St. Baldrick's. The beard will be gone March 18th. I am raising money that day is the end of it for childhood cancer research. I'm not going to shave my head, but I'll probably trim that as well. But definitely the beard is gone. And I am raising money for those children that need that money towards childhood cancer. It's a very important cause for me and something that I believe is near and dear to me. Also near and dear to me is my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I'm a Christian man, and I feel I've been called by God according to his will to not only discuss weather and be a meteorologist, but to share my faith with you. We all have a place where we all have a calling, and my calling is weather, but it also is faith. And I really hope that for you it is as well. And if it's not, that's perfectly fine. No judgment here. That's not my role today. But if you need me to pray for you or somebody that you know, a member of your family, I am happy to do that. I think it's very important that those of us who are believers talk with God and ask him and pray together. And, it's definitely a world out there right now where we've got worldly temptations, we've got strife, we've got disagreement, and we have a lot of really bad things going on that some of us have put upon ourselves and kind of turned away from God from. But some things I don't think are in our control, like severe weather, like tornadoes that kill people and take away their homes. However, the thing that I have seen in areas that have really gotten hit hard by extreme weather events, that people get pulled together in the face of these tragedies and come together as a community. And to me, that's God's work. when our time on earth is gone, we have the choice to become members of the kingdom and to meet our Savior and to meet God and to be up in heaven. But if we don't make that choice, then we very well would perish. Man without vision shall perish. So I want to read real quick to you guys from Ephesians 6:10 through 17, when Paul speaks to the church of Ephesus to put on the armor of God, because we are all dealing with these constant battles, but the Lord is here with us. Paul says in Ephesians 6:10, finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything to stand firm then with the belt of truth, truth, of course, being the holy word of God through Jesus Christ, the truth buckled around your waist with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. We're all going to be facing storms. We're all going to be facing attacks from evil. That includes deadly tornadoes, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes. That includes worldly powers, evil powers taking over and throwing things into complete chaos, like we're seeing in Ukraine and in other parts of the country or the world, parts of Africa as well. However, those of us who are believers can stand firm knowing that the truth is there with us and we are protected from this, and that in the end, what really matters is that we have the helmet of salvation. That is the promise that Jesus is coming one day and he's coming to save us. And that is very important to me. And I wanted to share that word with you today because I think it means a lot. So if you do have time, please spend a little bit of time in the word. If you have prayer requests, I'm happy to pray for you. And I just want to let you all know that I really appreciate y'all's time today. I hope you can share this video with other friends. And if you're still with me, I think it's a very powerful message that has been given to us and something I do not take lightly. So thank you all. I hope you have a great weekend. I'll have a video for you in the morning. Have a great day, and God bless you.